All right, everyone, get ready for this. We're diving deep into a topic that I'm sure resonates with a lot of you out there, anger. How do we understand it? How do we manage it? And how can we even use it as a strength? We've got this really cool book that's going to guide us, and it takes a pretty unique approach, exploring this link between, get this, heart-brain coherence and really mastering those emotions of ours.
I find fascinating. This book doesn't just skim the surface with some, pop psychology stuff. It goes way deeper, like into the biological roots of anger, even the spiritual side. It's a really well-rounded view.
Okay, I got to ask, this whole heart-brain coherence thing, it sounds a little, well, new agey. Is there real science behind it or what?
Oh, it's way more grounded than you might think. Just imagine, like, your heart and brain are two musicians trying to play a duet. When you're all stressed out or angry, it's like they're totally out of sync. Clashing cymbals, off-key notes, the whole bit.
Ouch. Yeah, I can practically hear that. So how do we get them to, like, play in harmony then?
That's where something called heart rate variability comes in. It's basically a measure of those tiny differences in the time between your heartbeats. High variability, that's actually a good thing. It means your heart is responsive, adaptable. And this book argues that things like mindful breathing, they can actually directly influence this variability. You create this state of coherence where your heart and brain are working together nice and smooth.
So it's kind of like fine-tuning your engine, but for your emotions.
Bingo. And that smoothly running engine, it's way less likely to overheat and explode when you hit those bumps in the road, those frustrations that always seem to pop up.
Gotcha. Okay, so can we back up a second, just talk about, like, what happens inside our bodies when that anger flares up? I know there's that fight or flight response, but how does that even play out in the world we live in today?
Okay, picture this. Our ancestors, they lived in a world with tons of real physical threats. Predators, rival tribes, the works. Their nervous systems were wired to react immediately. Boom. Adrenaline, cortisol, everything pumping, getting them ready to fight or run.
Yeah, that makes sense. But we're not dodging saber-toothed tigers on our way to the office.
Exactly. But here's the thing, our biology, it hasn't quite caught up to our modern lifestyles. So now, those same stress hormones get triggered by things like traffic jams, those deadlines at work, even just disagreements with our partners. And that flood of chemicals, it can just hijack our rational thinking. You end up doing impulsive things you might regret later.
So it's like our bodies are stuck in overdrive, even when there's no real danger.
You got it. And that's where this book's approach is so cool. It doesn't just try to suppress those anger responses. It actually teaches you how to spot the signs, like your heart racing, your jaw clench, that shallow breathing, and you interrupt that whole cycle before it goes too far.
So you become aware of those internal cues, and you have a plan to step in, like hitting the pause button before things get out of control.
Exactly. That's where techniques like mindfulness come in. And this book, it goes way beyond that basic take a deep breath advice. It dives into specific practices, things like focused breathing and different types of meditation that have been shown to actually calm the nervous system and bump up that heart rate variability.
Okay, so mindfulness. It's not just some airy-fairy concept. There's real science backing it up.
Oh, yeah, totally. There's a ton of research out there that shows these practices can actually change our physiology, reduce those stress hormones, and bring on a sense of calm. The book even mentions studies that show just 3 minutes of focused breathing can seriously disrupt that anger response cycle, giving you that window to choose a different way to react.
That's amazing. So even if we can't totally avoid those things that trigger our anger, we can learn to change how our bodies and minds respond to them.
Exactly. It's all about taking control of the story instead of letting anger write it for you.
I like that. But it can't just be about breathing exercises, can it? There's got to be more to managing anger effectively.
Oh, you're absolutely right. This book, it goes beyond mindfulness and digs into the power of this cognitive behavioral strategies. These techniques are all about helping you recognize and then challenge those negative thought patterns that often just fuel the fire of anger.
Okay, so how does that work in the real world?
All right, so let's say someone cuts you off in traffic, right? Your first thought might be, that jerk did that on purpose just to tick me off. That thought, it sparks that surge of anger, and before you know it, you're laying on the horn or maybe even yelling something you shouldn't.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Right. But what if, instead of jumping to that conclusion, you just pause for a second and challenge that thought? Maybe the other driver was distracted, didn't even see you. By just reframing that situation, you can actually diffuse the anger before it takes over.
So it's about interrupting those automatic negative thoughts, those knee-jerk reactions, and replacing them with more, I don't know, rational, balanced view.
Precisely. And the book gives you a whole toolbox of strategies to do just that. It teaches you how to spot those thought patterns that lead to anger, then you question how true they are, and finally you swap them out for thoughts that are more helpful, more realistic.
That's game-changing. It's like rewiring your brain to react differently to all those little annoyances we deal with every day.
And it's not just about changing your thoughts, the behavioral part of CBT. It's focused on giving you practical skills to handle those anger-provoking situations. It explores things like assertiveness training, which is all about empowering you to communicate your needs and your boundaries clearly and respectfully without getting aggressive.
So you're finding that sweet spot between being passive and being aggressive. You stand up for yourself, but you don't let anger call the shots.
Exactly. It's about being in control, not letting your emotions run the show. In the book, it gives you concrete examples and exercises to really help you get good at these techniques.
This is starting to click now. But what about those times when you're already heated and that anger is bubbling over? Any tips for those moments?
One of the best strategies the book talks about is just taking a time out. If you feel like you're about to lose it, just step away from the situation. Could be as simple as walking away for a few minutes to cool down.
That's such good advice. It's so easy to say or do something you regret when you're caught up in those intense emotions.
Oh, for sure. It's like hitting pause on a movie before things get too crazy. It gives you a chance to calm down and really think clearly before you react. The book even suggests having a phrase ready to go in these situations, something like, I need a few minutes to gather my thoughts.
That's smart. Takes the pressure off in the moment and lets you respond in a more measured way later on. This is all great stuff, but what about forgiveness? I mean, sometimes anger comes from being hurt or wronged by someone else.
You hit the nail on the head. And the book goes deep into this whole role of forgiveness in managing anger. It basically says that holding on to anger and resentment is like drinking poison yourself and expecting the other person to die.
Whoa, that's a powerful image. So forgiveness, it's more about freeing yourself from that anger burden than condoning what the other person did.
Exactly. It doesn't mean you minimize the hurt or pretend it never happened. It's about acknowledging the pain, really letting yourself feel it, and then making the choice to let go of that resentment that's keeping you stuck.
I can see how that could be so freeing. But I imagine forgiveness is a process, not just a switch you flip on and off.
Absolutely. And the book gives some practical steps to navigate that process. It stresses how important it is to express your feelings in a constructive way, set healthy boundaries, and ultimately choose to release that desire for revenge.
This has been a fascinating dive so far. We've talked about the biology of anger, that heart-brain coherence thing, cognitive techniques, and even this complex idea of forgiveness. But I have a feeling there's even more to uncover.
You're right. We haven't even touched on how powerful physical activity can be for anger management or the spiritual side of mastering our emotions.
We'll be back soon to explore all that. Until then, remember, it's not about getting rid of anger completely, but learning how to harness its power and channel it in a healthy, constructive way. All right, welcome back. We're picking up our deep dive into mastering anger. We've already gone over some really useful techniques for calming down that nervous system and changing those thoughts that tend to make us angry. But now I'm curious about this whole connection between being physically active and keeping that anger in check. It seems a bit contradictory, doesn't it? I mean, isn't exercise supposed to get your adrenaline going?
Yeah, that's a pretty common misunderstanding. While exercise does rev up your heart rate for a bit, the book points out that if you're active regularly, it actually helps your stress response system get better at handling things over time. It's like you're training your body to deal with those bursts of adrenaline and cortisol more effectively. So, you're less likely to get hijacked by them in everyday
So
situations.
it's not about using exercise to vent your frustration. It's more like you're building resilience against those anger triggers.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And what's cool is this book goes beyond the usual exercise is good for you stuff and gets specific about which activities are particularly good for managing anger.
Okay, lay it on me. What does it recommend?
It really emphasizes activities where you're both physically pushing yourself and mentally focused. Things like martial arts, weightlifting, even certain types of yoga.
I could see how those would be perfect for channeling that, masculine energy in a positive direction. It's not just mindlessly hitting the treadmill, it's engaging your body and mind at the same time.
Exactly. And the book has some really interesting research to back this up. For instance, studies have shown that weightlifting can significantly lower your levels of cortisol, that's the stress hormone, and Even moderate exercise can improve your mood and how well you think.
So it's like a win-win. You're getting physically stronger and mentally calmer all at once.
Right. And there's another fascinating thing the book talks about, this idea that being physically active can help men reconnect with a sense of agency and control. And that can be incredibly empowering when it comes to managing anger.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's about feeling capable and confident, not just in your physical strength, but also in your ability to handle tough situations and setbacks without letting anger take the wheel.
Exactly. And that sense of mastery, it goes beyond just the gym or the martial arts studio. It spills over into other parts of your life, giving you the confidence to navigate those tricky situations with more calm and composure.
I love that. So it's not just about getting ripped, it's about tapping into that primal energy we have and channeling it into something positive.
And speaking of tapping into something deeper, we haven't even gotten to the spiritual side of managing anger yet.
Okay, I'll admit, this is where I get a bit skeptical. I'm all for personal growth, but spirituality can sometimes feel a bit too, well, out there for me. How does this book approach it without getting too woo-woo?
It's actually pretty down to earth and practical. The book doesn't try to push any specific religion or belief system. It focuses on that universal human need for meaning, purpose, and connecting to something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does that relate to keeping our anger in check?
Think about it this way. When anger takes over, our focus gets super narrow. We get fixated on whatever we see as unfair, the person or the situation we blame for our suffering.
It's like tunnel vision. You can't see past that immediate frustration.
Exactly. But the book argues that connecting with something larger than ourselves, whether that's nature, a higher power, or even just that sense of shared humanity, it can help us break out of that limited perspective. It lets us see the bigger picture, realize we're all connected, and cultivate compassion even for those who've wronged us.
So it's about shifting our perspective from ego and resentment to a more open and forgiving mindset.
Exactly. And the book offers some really insightful guidance on how to cultivate this spiritual awareness. It explores things like meditation, contemplation, even just mindful engagement with nature.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. It's not about denying our anger, but tapping into a deeper source of peace and strength inside us that can help us deal with those tough emotions with more wisdom and grace.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that anger, even though it's a natural human emotion, doesn't have to control us. We have the power to choose a different path, to respond instead of just reacting, and ultimately to change our relationship with anger completely.
This has been really eye-opening. We've covered so much, the biology of anger, that heart-brain coherence thing, cognitive techniques, the role of forgiveness, the power of physical activity, and now this whole spiritual dimension. It's amazing how it all connects.
It really is a holistic approach. And while we've gone over a lot, we still need to talk about the impact anger can have on our relationships and our work lives. That's where things get real.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for the last part of our deep dive, where we'll tackle those essential aspects of managing anger in our everyday interactions. And we're back for the final part of our deep dives into mastering anger. We've explored some really powerful techniques for understanding and managing this complex emotion, but now it's time to get practical. How does all this stuff actually play out in our everyday lives, especially when it comes to our relationships and work?
This is where the rubber really meets the road.
Mhm.
The book makes this really interesting point. Anger, even though we often think of it as a personal feeling, can actually have a ripple effect on the people around us, sometimes in really damaging ways.
It's like there's a hidden cost to anger,
hmm
right? We get so focused on how we're feeling in the moment, but we don't always see the harm it can do to our connections with others.
Exactly. It's easy to think, hey, it's my anger, I can express it however I want. But the truth is, what we do, even if it's driven by anger, has consequences, especially in our close relationships.
So it's not just about our own personal well-being, it's about taking responsibility for creating healthy and harmonious relationships with the people in our lives.
You got it. And the book gives us some really great insights into how to do that. It starts with having good communication. And this isn't about holding back your feelings or walking on eggshells. It's about learning to express your needs and your boundaries clearly in an assertive way, but without blaming or attacking.
So it's about finding that balance between bottling things up and letting your anger explode.
Exactly. The book calls it constructive expression. It's about using I statements to talk about what you're experiencing instead of accusing the other person. Staying calm and respectful, even when you're feeling really intense emotions.
Makes sense. But communication's a two-way street, right?
Right.
What about listening?
That's just as important. The book emphasizes how crucial it is to really listen, especially when your partner or someone you're close to is sharing their feelings. It's about putting your own defensiveness aside and truly hearing what they're trying to tell you.
Creating a space for empathy and understanding, even when it's tough.
Yeah, it's about putting yourself in their shoes, seeing things from their side. You don't have to agree with them, but you do need to acknowledge their experience and validate how they're feeling.
Empathy. It's such a powerful way to counter anger, both for ourselves and the people we care about.
Absolutely. The book also gets into setting healthy boundaries. It's about being clear about your limits and what you expect. Not in a controlling way, but in a way that respects both your needs and theirs.
Boundaries are so important for any healthy relationship, right? They create a sense of safety and prevent resentment from building up over time.
And these principles, they don't just apply to our personal lives, they're super important at work too. The book talks about how anger, if it's not managed, can really sabotage careers, damage relationships with colleagues, and just create a toxic environment.
We've all seen that, right? That coworker who blows up over nothing, leaving everyone else feeling stressed out and uncomfortable.
Exactly. The book stresses the importance of being professional. Even when you're frustrated, it's about staying calm, being respectful, not letting your emotions affect how you do your job.
That can be hard, especially in those high-pressure situations.
It is, but the book offers some good strategies for those moments. It talks about developing conflict resolution skills. Disagreements are bound to happen at work, but it's how you handle them that matters.
So it's about finding ways to address those conflicts constructively, instead of letting them escalate into big arguments or passive-aggressive behavior.
Exactly. You approach those situations wanting to solve the problem, focusing on finding solutions that work for everyone, instead of trying to win no matter what. The book suggests things like active listening, compromise, even getting a mediator involved if you need to.
It's like remembering we're all on the same team, even when we see things differently.
Right. And the book reminds us that learning to manage anger is a journey. We're going to slip up sometimes, let our emotions take over. The important thing is to not beat ourselves up about it, but see those missteps as chances to learn and grow.
It's about progress, not perfection, right?
Mm.
The more we practice these techniques, the more they become second nature, and the better we get at handling those tough moments with grace and composure.
Well said. And at the end of the day, that's what this book is all about. It's not about eliminating anger completely. It's about changing how we relate to it, both within ourselves and in our interactions with others.
It's about seeing anger as a force that can be used for positive change, right?
Yes, it's about empowering ourselves to be the best we can be, not just for our own good, but for the good of everyone around us.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of anger and how to handle it in a healthy, constructive way.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, mastering anger takes time, but if you're committed and you put in the effort, you can achieve some incredible results. If you're interested in learning more, the book Heart Brain Sync is available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Definitely check it out if you want to dive deeper. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey. Remember, you have the power to choose how you react to anger. Choose wisely and choose with compassion for yourself and those you love.